Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil in this kind of reaction video on the ever-evolving Daybell case. Miss Sophia, you just blew my mind and made my day. Thank you for that very kind contribution. You and the mods do so much, and I just, frankly, I'm just blown away. You already do too much. And thanks to all of you for shouting out to the back office and letting them know that you're here. Let's get talking, and we'll come back and visit. But again, to the mods, thank you so very much for covering things today. Miss Sophia, thank you again for that kind donation. Well, nearly everybody thinks of the case of the murdered children, J.J., Joshua Vallow, and Tylee Ryan. Now, these are the two kids who were under the care of Lori Vallow Daybell when they mysteriously disappeared back in 2019. Numerous sources are now reporting that a grand jury has been convened in the Chad and Lori Daybell saga. And I just decided I was going to speak out about it for a few minutes. I've been watching this for a couple of days. They continue to come out that it's happening. All I can say is everything points toward it. I know Vinnie Politan talked about the fact that the word on the street is that the grand jury has convened. So I thought I'd share some thoughts. And again, they're merely my own thoughts, my own assessment of what's been going on. And we have to remember that this couple is innocent until a court rules otherwise in the case. Now, the grand jury is believed to have begun 3 days ago, actually running from May 17th through today, May 20th. Now, like you, I'm going to be anxiously awaiting the news on whether an indictment is going to be filed against Chad and or Lori Daybell. And for what? I mean, that's really the question we all have, isn't it? I mean, will it include a murder charge for Joshua and Tylee? I'm going to look for your comments in the comments section. And by the way, I got a little counsel from the back office, and I'm actually going to try to spend a little more time. I get nervous looking down here at the chat window, but I'm evolving and learning. So I'll keep trying. Sheila Dramonis, thank you so much for that kind super chat there. I really appreciate that. But yeah, is it going to be a murder charge? I don't know. What about Tammy Daybell? Think back on my video a week or so ago when we talked about the prosecution wanting to test the remaining DNA against evidence that they'd recovered on some tools and an undisclosed apartment. This is pretty interesting to me. And you know, again, this thing is happening now. It began a couple of days ago, and the jury is supposedly listening. The Daybell saga, as you all remember, began years ago as people that were close to Lori Daybell started dying. Lori racked up marriage after failed marriage. I mean, think about this. In fact, this probably is a little unfair to say, but her name can really tell the whole story here. If you looked at her marriages, her name is Lori Noreen Cox Yanes Yagiona Ryan Vallow Daybell. It's the result of marriages to Nelson Yanes and William Lagiona, and those both ended in divorce. She then married Joseph Ryan. This is the union where Tylee comes into the picture. And then that marriage also ends in divorce. And this is what gets kind of weird is Ryan's life comes to an end sometime later. And there are videos out there that talk about a lot of things that are disturbing to a lot of people. But that marriage ends in divorce, and Ryan's life comes to an end sometime later. Now, I hope you'll go back and look at the video that we did with Annie Cushing, Joseph Ryan's sister, where we talk about all the wacky things that were happening, how Lori Daybell was aware of Ryan's death, but didn't share it with family for some time. And of course, questions about the life insurance policy. And then, of course, later surfaced video of her talking about how wanted him dead based on allegations that she made. His death is a real head scratcher. And again, keep in mind that the medical examiner later determined that it was a death that was natural causes, poor health. This again, I don't know, I guess look into it. Then comes this marriage to Charles Vallow. This is where J.J. comes into the family picture through adoption. And this sweet little special needs child, who not only is special to Tylee, but to the grandparents, becomes part of this twisted, bizarre case. Well, after Lori and Chad become close, if you remember the video we did on this, and you can go back and look at all of these videos, and I hope you will. Lori and Chad become close. Chad even communicates through email with Charles Vallow, Lori's husband, but all of a sudden the relationship with Charles starts to deteriorate. And soon after that, Lori starts telling people that Charles had become a zombie. Well, eventually Charles is shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex, who incidentally believes in Lori's doomsday belief system and this zombie concept. Now, Alex claims that Charles was killed during a domestic violence situation where he was assaulting Alex. You'll recall that Alex admittedly shot Vallow 4 times with a handgun, sits on the curb right after it happened, talking to police rather casually. Again, man, this is a brain scratcher. I guess it was really lucky that Alex Cox showed up on his surprise visit from out of state with a gun when he showed up at the home. But I'm one that's still waiting for the other shoe to drop on that case, and I believe that police there are going to continue to investigate that case and these suspicious homicides. Well, in Idaho, I want to look at this map a little closer here. This is the area of Idaho we're talking about right now. It's a map of Madison and Fremont counties that I've circled on the map. And it's shortly after Vallow's death that we see Lori moving to Rexburg, Idaho. Now, this is kind of intriguing because it's during this time that she and Chad start dating secretly while publicly building their doomsday following. Now, some of you have challenged my characterization that Lori and Chad were leaders of a cult. I just want to say I've studied cult behavior for much of my career. I'm still really comfortable in saying that, in my opinion, they were indeed leading a cult of doomsday believers. Now, a little bit of a shameless plug, but if you pick up my book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, you can read about some of these characteristics of cults, their behaviors, their mentality. And I hope if you did get a chance earlier this week, you caught me on Unmasked with Vanessa talking about another cult, the Love Has Won cult. And tomorrow, I hope at 6 p.m. Eastern time, that you'll catch our YouTube podcast with Rick Ross, one of the most brilliant minds in cult exit strategies out there, as we continue this discussion. But there you're going to kind of get a better sense of how I kind of squeeze Chad and Lori into this cult bucket. I really appreciate all your support in that regard. And you can get the book on profilingevil.com or Amazon, but let's get back to the case. Now, the next thing that really became intriguing was that as they're in Idaho, all of a sudden this Yellowstone video starts to come into play. And I wanted to play this because some of our viewers gave us this. They actually looked through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of video in Yellowstone at the time those kids were reportedly in the park, and actually found them walking. Here you can see them walking through Yellowstone Park. A really remarkable video, and I wanted to just bring that out because this is just days before the kids disappear. Alex still is very strongly figured into the imagery here, the activities, the trip itself, and of course they make sure to document all kinds of pictures about them. Now, if you think about Alex for a second, if you remember, he then goes on and marries in Las Vegas, changes his last name, but the marriage doesn't last very long. As you recall, he too suddenly dies in his home. Now, again, the medical examiner said natural causes. I just find it so odd that this many people around Chad and Lori Daybell seem to be dying left and right. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, boy, this would have to be a really unsettling time for anybody who knew the couple, especially if you happen to be a zombie. But those family members, especially those that were estranged, started reporting things like being shot at. Then Tammy Daybell, Chad's longtime wife, suddenly dies in her sleep. This is according to Chad, remember. He somehow convinces the authorities that an autopsy isn't necessary. Man, I am still scratching my head about that one. How does a seemingly healthy woman, a person who runs marathons, who's working a full-time job, suddenly die in the night, and then an autopsy doesn't get requested? You just can't make this stuff up, folks. I mean, holy cow, this is crazy. Well, within days, this couple finds themselves boarding an airplane and flying to Hawaii, where they get married. It would take an arrest and an extradition to get them back to Idaho, where Lori will face misdemeanor charges of child endangerment. This is up in Madison County. That's why I wanted to show you where both of those counties were. And all of this is happening while police continue to frantically look for these missing kids. Well, we know the end of the story. Sadly, their bodies are discovered in Chad Daybell's backyard. His arrest would follow. And now we see the two of them sitting in jail, facing felony charges related to the discovery. So Lori has 2 felony charges and a misdemeanor, the misdemeanor charges from Madison County. Felony charges are in Fremont County. Chad has felony charges in Fremont County. And this is all for the discovery of the children being buried in Chad's backyard. Well, if you remember, several months ago, Chad's former wife, Tammy, was exhumed and fully examined this time for forensic evidence in hopes that they might explain how this otherwise healthy woman dies in her sleep. Now, again, she died in her sleep according to Chad. And as all these puzzle pieces start to come together, we learn that people in the area near the Daybells, including family members, have quietly been getting subpoenas over the last couple of weeks to sit on a jury in a grand jury inquiry. Now, if the reports are accurate, the grand jury should conclude tonight. Now, the question is, why has it taken so long? And that's a question I've heard from you for, more than a year now. These kinds of investigations are really complex and they take a lot of time. But to add to the challenge, we got to remember we as a people were propelled into a worldwide pandemic last year, effectively shutting down the government and the courts. Now, I want you, if you're interested, because I want to talk a little bit about grand juries, but if you're interested, I want to invite you down below our links to Profiling Evil. And in there, you can go to a story map section. And as you scroll through the story maps, there's a story map on Chad and Lori Daybell, and it gets you everything that I've kind of talked about with a lot more content. Videos about Chad preaching from the pulpit, pictures from their youth when they were, he and Tammy were first getting married, Lori's husbands, and a little breakdown on each of those husbands. And as you look at this, it's made to be interactive so that you can look not only on a map, but you can read content that's in there and take advantage of it. Again, I really hope we put a lot of work into these story maps. I hope you'll take advantage of looking at them and seeing what's there. You're going to get information about Lori, background information on her, where she lived, where she moved to. You'll get information again on, like I said, Chad. You're going to read about things like Lori's sister. You're going to hear about this doomsday belief system where these two are preaching from a pulpit about the end of the world coming and about their ideologies. You'll hear about Tammy's sister, who suffered from schizophrenia and died. Her father, according to public reports, suffered from schizophrenia. That makes you think a little, doesn't it? You're going to look at and see information about Alex Cox, Joseph Ryan, Charles Vallow, and in all of those, information about how they possibly could have died. So I hope you'll go there and look at that. Again, it's profilingevil.com, story maps, and hopefully you'll find some information that you find helpful there. But let's get back and talk for a moment about grand juries, because I've had a number of you ask over the last year, what is a grand jury, as we've seen them pop up in other locations. So here's a quick lesson on grand juries, and I hope it helps you. So a grand jury has reportedly been convened and should be ending today. Witnesses have been called, family members of Chad's. I suspect that includes his children. They're gonna be looking at a lot of things. Does it mean that a certain case, Tammy's or Joshua and Tylee's, is the focus, or maybe all of them? That's what we got to watch for, and I hope you'll keep watching for that. I'll let you know as soon as I hear something. But a few weeks ago, the Idaho Supreme Court released a document. It's an order that allowed jury trials in Idaho to resume if the COVID infection rates dropped below 25 events per 100,000 population. Well, as of February, no. March, no. But just recently, Madison County and Fremont County have apparently satisfied the restriction, and a grand jury was convened. Now, a grand jury will decide if there's enough evidence to charge a person or persons with a crime. Grand juries don't. They do not determine guilt. They determine if there's enough evidence to charge a person with a crime. They merely decide if that evidence exists, and if so, then they can bind someone over for trial. It can get rid of the preliminary hearing. It's no longer necessary, since a grand jury is a legal court that has determined that enough evidence exists for them to proceed. Now, they call them a grand jury because it's actually the number of members that are required to sit in the jury box. It's huge. It's grand. Now, most juries are 12 members in size usually. Grand juries can be from 16 people to 23 people sitting in the jury box. Now, my understanding in Idaho is that it's a 16-member grand jury. There are federal grand juries and state grand juries. And in Idaho, my understanding is it's 16 members who will sit in this grand jury. Now, in order to get an indictment, 12 of those 16 people, 75%, need to believe at the end of the testimony that's given that there's enough evidence, and they side with the prosecution to push for an indictment, or it's an order that basically says that that person is bound over for trial. So does this frustrate you or excite you? I mean, I'm really excited about this, and I'm going to watch the chats a little bit here, and then I'm going to spend some time looking at questions. I hope that it excites you, because grand juries are a good thing. They provide a certain level of protection to defendants. And I think it's important to protect the defendant in this process, because they prevent trials from happening if there isn't sufficient evidence. It could save people from a lot of embarrassment if there's not sufficient evidence. It's in these kinds of proceedings that the state has to convince the jurors that there's enough probable cause to believe, in this particular case, that Daybell's committed a crime, whether it's additional charges in the body desecration or murder charges for Joshua and Tylee, or perhaps murder charges or something else in Tammy's case. Now, remember that probable cause simply means that there is reasonable ground to believe that a crime occurred, that a grand jurist would listen to it and say, that makes sense. I believe that that's possible. Now, if there's enough evidence, then there would be an indictment or a charging document for the crime. It's really important for us to note that the indictment isn't the same as a conviction. So if the Daybells or a Daybell gets indicted, we still have to presume they're innocent under the Constitution of the United States. That has to be our tact until a trial's held and a final determination of guilt is made. So I hope that this is helpful, and I really look forward to reading your comments as we go through this. The wheels of justice really move slowly in some cases. This is one of them. And we've all been following this with a lot of anticipation. But this cautionary path is really good. It ensures the rights of the accused are protected. And in my opinion, the greater thing is that it protects and minimizes the chance of an appeal later down the road. So I think this is really good. I hope it's all true. It's all based on public information that's leaking out. And I hope tonight they announce that a grand jury was held. And frankly, I hope that they announce that an indictment has been laid down, and then we can start looking toward things. So let's take some time and just look at what's going on in here. And Barb Nauman, wow, it's great to see your name. And thank you for that wonderful donation. Cheers to the back office. Amen. Amen. They just knock it out of the park. And I just appreciate them so much. Well, let's get in here and look at some questions. Now, I want you to know the back office counseled me. They said I get this mindset that I don't want to waste your time. And by doing that, I missed some of your questions. So I'm going to actually look closely at the questions and see if I can answer some of those as we go along. And again, thanks to all of you for jumping on. Folks, if you're not subscribed to Profiling Evil, would you please hit the subscribe button? It sure helps, and it helps us grow. And please hit the like button. It helps us be recognized in YouTube's world as well. So let me read here for a moment. In fact, I'm going to just shout out Mary Glick and Miss Milky the Clown. Thank you. Cody Wells. Good to see Cody back. Carolina, great to see your name here again. Wendy Henschel. It's great to see some of you who I haven't seen for a bit. Let's see. People as far away as South Africa calling in. Let's see. Now, folks, I need questions. If there's something that I can answer, I'll try to answer it. Here's an interesting comment by L. McQueenie. Dr. Weck cautioned that Tammy Daybell's autopsy may not be conclusive to establish homicide by poisoning since the embalming interferes greatly. There are challenges that will come with that. What will be interesting is to look for what physical evidence might be discovered by an autopsy. Simple things like the hyoid bone being dislodged and broken, something that would be significant and suggest even simple things like a ligature around the neck or things like that. But yeah, that's right. There are going to be some challenges with this. But if you remember when we had Dr. Salerno on, we talked about how toxology can remain in the body, and there still is a lot of information that can be gathered. Go back and look at those videos on Joseph Ryan and Vallow and Alex Cox, where we talk with the good doc about that information. Let's see. AAG, I don't know if that's Assistant Attorney General or not, but do you think this case eventually goes to court? Will it be televised? I think we're moving into an era where media is going to request, and we're seeing this. I submitted a media request in Salida on the Morphew case. I'm waiting to hear if the judge would even recognize a YouTube channel for something like that. But it's going to boil down to if the media continues to push and there's enough public demand, then we probably will see that happen. I think defense will always argue against that unless just some wacky case was put out by the prosecution and they want to get that up. Let's see. Karen Olson's saying, after the grand jury confirms there's enough evidence for trial, how long will it take for the trial to begin? The standard is usually within 6 months the person should be going to trial. So I just always kind of look at it as about a 6-month window before we'll start seeing trial. And remember, in this particular case, there won't be a preliminary hearing. So this actually keeps the evidence hidden from us a little bit longer when it's done in a grand jury. And, even the defense may not see the evidence that is there other than what's supplied through discovery. So these grand juries are really interesting. They provide a lot of dynamic to these kinds of cases. Diane Ledford says, I'm under the impression that all the autopsies are going to be challenged to conduct. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I would think the autopsy on J.J. and Tylee, where the bodies didn't have chemicals induced that we know of. Now, again, we have someone who was in the mortuary business, so it'll be interesting. But we may have a difference in those two cases where there wasn't a formal process to embalm the body. I agree with Lisa Lacombe. The children deserve justice. Let's see. And here's a great comment from Catherine. Joseph Ryan has been cremated. They said it was natural causes, but there was limited information that was collected in a shortened version of an autopsy that Dr. Salerno spoke to that, again, is interesting and could provide some insights. So that might be worth going back and listening to if you're interested in. Folks, thanks for those of you, by the way, who support me through channel memberships. You can do that for like as little as $1.99 a month, but that really helps us move things along and keep things going. For your donations through Venmo, PayPal, or these super chats, it is just really appreciated and helpful. MJ Monroe says, life without parole for both is the verdict. Well, let's get an indictment, and then let's get a conviction, and we'll hope for those things to happen. How long after charges? After the indictment? Well, the indictment is the charging document. So if the grand jury says there's enough evidence, then we'll start looking toward setting some trial dates. So. Let's see. Let's see. Debbie Hartman says, hi from South Africa. Thank you for the great feedback. I know it's off subject, but have you done anything to cover Scientology? Do you think they're a cult? That's an interesting thing. There's been a lot of stuff out there on Scientology, and I know that they're all over the globe, so I suspect I don't know where in South Africa you are, whether you're well, Debbie, maybe you can say where you're from down there. I actually had a son who lived there for a number of years, and so we love South Africa. Anyway, let's see here. Now, this is interesting. Susie says, I was under the impression that even with cremations, tissue samples are taken prior to. So there's a process called, it's either an attended death or an unattended death. Attended means you're under the care of a doctor, and sometimes the doctor can make a decision and say, you know what, based on the care that we've been going through, I guess I'm not surprised that this individual had an event and died. It's usually in an unattended death that will see, or obviously a crime scene that will see an autopsy happen. So, in autopsies, let me tell you, they are incredibly invasive, and families don't want to see that happen if they don't have to. The thing that's interesting in this case is this healthy woman dies, and somehow law enforcement or the health industry decides that an autopsy is not necessary. I don't know. Lisa Anderson says, I find it insane how long these things are dragged out. Even circumstantially, it's pretty apparent these two ringleaders did. At least I'm going to pull that one off and say it's a murder case. And if we're going to put somebody away forever, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And so, yeah, they do take a long time. Boy, sometimes maddeningly. Is that the right word? Maddeningly. But anyway, yeah. So let's see. The other question is, can Lori and Chad video chat talk to each other in jail? That's an interesting question, Addie Gary. I don't know the answer because in some cases you have a right to, well, in all cases you have a right to confer with your counsel, not necessarily co-defendants. That's the counsel's job. And since they're both inmates, usually there's something that prevents inmates from socializing. So especially if they're co-defendants in a case, but gosh, I don't know. Maybe someone can answer that. Let's see. Here's a question from Audrey Gibson. Again, why do they call a grand jury? For what reason or circumstance? So grand jury, hopefully go back if you missed it and listen to what a grand jury is. But the idea in essence is it allows the prosecution to put out the evidence and get the court to say there is probable cause, there is enough evidence to go to trial and get right to trial. It's a cumbersome process. It takes time. It is expensive for the government, and those states that have them. It really, when you think about it, is a pretty powerful tool because it gives the prosecution a chance to say, here's the evidence, and have normal people, you and me, who are called as jurors, to say, I believe it. And if we believe it, then that means there's enough evidence to support it going before a judge in a formal hearing. So let's see. Sad news here. Julianne Harris says a police officer was shot in Colorado Springs. So hoping that the officer survives that. Thanks for putting that up there. Let's see. So here's an interesting question from Maureen Walsh. Why embalm? She was buried 3 days later, or why, or who suggested this? Was it Chad? So you know, there's a lot of people that choose to have green burials and not do that. They want to have cremation. Embalming generally has been because it usually takes time for family to come from out of town and get there, and they want the body to be somewhat preserved so that people can have a proper viewing. It's actually a beautiful thing for a lot of people. Some people don't want to see the body, but not necessarily a push one way or another. So it looks like and it looks like Sue Duplessis, South Africa, from the Limpopo province. So yeah, how long do we wait? Yeah, amen. Hey, thanks, Ray. Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, we're praying for the police officer. And by the way, folks, watch Lord Nart's tomorrow morning when he releases a video. I'll be appearing on that with him, and we'll be talking about the murder of Detective Dennis Westenhoff, a friend of Ray's and now mine. Ray served with him in narcotics many years ago, and he was murdered in a horrible murder. If you haven't seen that on Profiling Evil's choir practice, go back and look up the murder of Detective Dustin Hoff. His beautiful daughters will be on the show tomorrow, as they were on mine a few weeks ago, as was Ray. So, yeah, thanks, Ray. Good to see you, bud. Let's see. Now, this is an interesting question, Melanie. I don't know anything really about schizophrenia and whether it's genetic and hereditary. Here's what I do know. There have been documents that suggest that there may be some hereditary tendencies. What I found interesting in this case is, and this is Mike's opinion, please, folks, but in looking at most of the experts that look at cults, cult leaders oftentimes have schizophrenic tendencies or are downright schizophrenic. Some may suggest Amy Carlson from Love Has Won was schizophrenic. Others say no, she just was kind of bipolar. Others say no, she was just pulled into this. But when you watch her rants and her screaming, this self-elevated belief that I'm God or Christ, those are all things that to an untrained mind like mine, I'm not a mental health professional. I studied a lot of psychology as part of all of the profiling stuff that I did, but it seems to be a consistent theme of schizophrenia in those people who believe that they are God or reincarnated gods. Now, in this particular case, we know that Lori said on occasions that she was reincarnated, had done other lives and lived as other great human beings in life. I don't know if Chad originally said that, but she and he both said, we were married in previous lives or other kinds of things. That's troubling to me. The zombie thing is troubling to me. The end of times and that we are the ones who will usher you through is interesting. But what I really found interesting, and nobody seems to talk a lot about, is that Lori's sister, as shown by court documents on the StoryMap that I put up, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And it's mentioned in the same series of documents that their father, Lori, and her sister, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, had suffered with schizophrenia. So to answer your question, I don't know, but isn't that an interesting coincidence that that was going on in that particular family? So I just don't know. I would agree 100% with Rain Dance. Cults are very dangerous. They worry me. So let's see. This is interesting. Algo 1, wasn't she just diabetic? Go back and look at the actual court documents that that Lori's brother-in-law filed in regard to her sister, where they talk about that. So, and I have to agree right here, just some internet check. These armchair diagnoses do a lot to further stigmatize folks like myself. I'm so sorry, who are disabled with mental illness. So please, folks, I take this real seriously, and thanks for putting this up. And maybe you've already signed off. So if you have, it's a great message. Folks, I want to make it clear. I didn't say Lori was schizophrenic, but I said these are the tendencies, and these are things that have been publicly reported about other family members, including through some court documentation. So interesting. Some people are suggesting in the chat maybe it started after she met Chad. Again, as we learn more about her, then that's great. Here, Maureen Walsh is saying Lori's father is a diagnosed schizophrenic. So again, this isn't a discussion about schizophrenia, other than I feel really bad that last comment about I'm going to sign off. I hope you listened long enough to know people aren't judging. We're just saying what publicly is out there. So let's see. Here's an interesting thing from Susie. Next door neighbor who had schizophrenia said it was hereditary. Yeah, again, I just wish I knew, but I don't. So this is a great question. Do I have an opinion either way if Lori or Chad was more influential in the couple? Here's just my assessment, having looked at the behavior. It's interesting that people seem to topple around Lori before Chad Daybell ever came into the picture, but those closest to Lori continued to topple. I find that kind of interesting. That usually what we see in cults is people with like ideologies, like mindsets gather together because it supports the belief system that they have. So they naturally find each other. And with the internet, we can find more of people with like mindsets. We represent that in this true crime community. We're people of like mindset who like to look into these cases and kind of talk and try to better understand them. What is interesting is that I don't know that Chad would have had the control over Alex. And I wonder if Lori, who some describe as this beautiful blonde, somehow filled a need that Chad had when all of a sudden she started paying attention to him. Either way, what happened was a whole batch of gasoline, and a great big flame came together when those two came together, and some really interesting things happened as a result of that. I hope that's a diplomatic way of maybe answering that question. So let's see. People asking why doesn't the government get involved in cults? Well, couple of reasons why that are kind of I think just these are, again, Mike's opinion, David Taylor, and that is number one, it's not against the law to be crazy. It's not against the law to have a belief system. What is against the law is when it becomes controlling and destructive. And that's when law enforcement can get involved. The cults can be broadly defined. Your favorite sports team and your fanaticism over your favorite sports team could, by definition, fit within the realm of a cult or a cult following. The thing that's important, and what the experts continue to remind us all of, is that it's when that becomes destructive in nature and controlling, power, dominion, and control, then it becomes a problem for police to be concerned about. And even the fact that cults will convince family members not to talk to other family members is not a crime. It's not against the law for an adult to go missing and disappear off the map. So law enforcement has to look for the elements of things that a government has said is criminal in nature: sexual abuse, fraud, emotional abuse, elder abuse, those kinds of things we can concentrate on, money laundering, abusing federal resources, public resources. So anyway, I'm rambling, but hopefully that helps. Well, you all are just great folks. Thank you so much. Again, if you have not subscribed to Profiling Evil, would you please do so? It helps us grow. I personally really appreciate it because we want to be successful at what we're doing. And I hope that you'll be honest with us and tell us if we're just wasting your time. And if we are, then I hope you're just dropping us like a lead balloon and moving on. I really have a focus of wanting not to just sensationalize these cases, but maybe explore them a little with you, maybe share a little insight that I have after a career of working in this field, maybe educate a little bit. And maybe the best term is to edutain a little bit as well on the way. We have an incredible back office who works their tails off to try to make sure we have good content. Thank you to all of you who make sure that they are supported and called out. To those who support my horrible addiction to Diet Dr. Pepper, thanks for continuing to do that. Now, here's a couple of things to think about. Let me know if you would like just a periodic question and answer time where we just sit down and we talk about whatever you want to talk about case-wise. It might help me understand some of the things that I ought to look into further and not. Let me know how you feel about me collaborating with other YouTube channels and other professionals, because I really like to do it. They are such brilliant people and I learn so much from them. But let me know. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the B.O.L.O, subscribe to it. You can do that at profilingevil.com. And make sure you watch tomorrow's broadcast of the podcast on cult dynamics. And in that, I think you'll get some additional insight that might answer some of your questions. Rachel Nicolashin, I hope I said that right. Thank you for that kind donation. She works in Utah with a lot of survivors, probably most likely from polygamy, and that's really nice. Thank you so much. Thanks for your service in trying to help those people. And to our new members, Maureen and others, thank you so much. 6 p.m. Eastern, the podcast on cults. Monday night, you're not going to want to miss choir practice. Going to have Officer Tatum on with me. Brandon Tatum, incredible human being, former law enforcement officer, and we'll be talking about a whole bunch of stuff. And we'll continue to follow what's going on here and pop in as necessary to see what we can do about continuing to bring this information to you in a timely manner. Thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. And we'll see you all at the next crime scene.